Close your eyes and picture Paris, the capital of France. The boulevards, the cafes, the monuments, one of the most visited cities on Earth. A city that has defined art, fashion, philosophy, and power for 1,000 years. Now, forget all of it. Because in the year 900 AD, the place we call Paris was something almost unrecognizable. A tiny island settlement surrounded by hostile water, threatened by Viking raiders, barely holding together. This was Paris in the year 900 AD, and it was barely a city at all. To understand what Paris was in 900 AD, you have to understand what it had been. 2,000 years before our story, Celtic fishermen called the Parisi had made this island their home. The island was perfect for a simple reason. Water on all sides meant safety from enemies approaching on land. Then, Rome arrived, and everything changed. The Romans called it Lutetia. They built it up, planned it out, and gave it the bones of a real city. A forum, bathhouses, an amphitheater on the left bank, stone bridges replacing wooden ones. For 3 centuries, Lutetia was a functioning Roman city, small by Roman standards, but real, organized, and growing. Then, Rome fell, and Lutetia fell with it. 400 years of Roman order, gone. What replaced it was something far more fragile. By 900 AD, virtually nothing of Roman Lutetia survived above ground. The population had collapsed from perhaps 20,000 under Rome to somewhere between 5,000 and 8,000 people. The entire city fit onto an island roughly 900 meters long and 200 meters wide. Walk its full length in 10 minutes, cross its width in 2. The buildings were mostly timber, rough-hewn logs and wattle and daub walls, thatched roofs that caught fire with alarming regularity. The streets, if you could call them that, were unpaved mud tracks, flooded in winter, baked hard and cracked in summer. There was no running water, no sewage system. Waste went into the Seine, the same river people drank from. Life expectancy hovered around 35 years. Infant mortality was catastrophic. And yet, this tiny, fragile settlement held something of enormous importance. It was the seat of a bishop, a center of Christian authority in a chaotic, fragmenting world. But in 885 AD, 15 years before our story's main focus, Paris faced its most terrifying moment. 700 Viking longships, between 30,000 and 40,000 Norse warriors, sailing up the Seine toward Paris. The count defending Paris, Odo of Paris, had perhaps 200 fighting men. 200 men against 40,000. The Vikings demanded passage through the bridges. Their target was not Paris itself, but the rich monasteries and towns upriver. Odo refused, and so began the Siege of Paris, one of the most dramatic events in medieval French history. The Vikings attacked the bridge towers with battering rams, fire ships, and siege engines. The defenders poured boiling oil, hot wax, and pitch down upon the attackers. For 11 months, the tiny garrison held. Inside the walls, food ran desperately short. Disease spread through the cramped population. People starved. And yet Odo refused to surrender, riding out through Viking lines to seek relief from the Frankish king. When the Frankish Emperor Charles the Fat finally arrived, he paid the Vikings to leave and let them sail upriver anyway. The rage this betrayal caused among the Frankish nobility effectively ended the Carolingian dynasty. Odo of Paris, the man who actually defended the city, was elected King of the Franks in 888 AD. But kings and sieges were the exception. Ordinary life in 900 AD Paris was something far more humble. The economy of the settlement ran almost entirely on 3 things: fishing, trade, and the church. The bridges were not just crossings, they were markets. Stalls crowded every available plank of the wooden bridge surface. Merchants from further afield brought wine from Burgundy, salt from the Atlantic coast, and grain from the surrounding farmland. The church dominated not just the spiritual, but the economic life of the settlement.
Monks in the nearby monastery of Saint-Germain-des-Prés ran one of the largest agricultural estates in the Paris basin. Monks kept bees, raised pigs, pressed wine, ground flour, sustaining the settlement through every crisis. And it was monks who kept literacy alive. In the darkness of the 9th century, almost only the church could read. Outside the monastery walls, most Parisians could not read a single word. News traveled by word of mouth. Laws were remembered, not written. History was sung, not recorded. Above the daily struggle for survival hung a political world of extraordinary instability. The Carolingian Empire, built by Charlemagne a century earlier, was in terminal collapse. 3 generations after Charlemagne, his descendants were fighting each other for scraps of a broken empire. While kings argued, it was local counts and lords who actually protected people. Power was fragmenting downward. This process, the fragmentation of Carolingian power into local lordships, was the birth of feudalism. And Paris, sitting at the center of the old Frankish heartland, was slowly becoming more important than its size suggested. The Seine connected the Atlantic to the interior of France. Whoever controlled the bridges controlled the river. In 987 AD, just a century after our story, the Carolingian dynasty finally ended. A new royal house took power. The Capetians chose Paris as their permanent royal residence, and everything changed. Within a century, Paris had spread across both riverbanks. Within 2 centuries, it was the largest city in Western Europe. The Cathedral of Notre-Dame, begun in 1163, rose on the exact site of the rough stone church that had anchored the tiny island settlement. The University of Paris, founded in 1550, grew from the cathedral school that monks had run since the darkest years of the 9th century. The Viking raiders who had threatened to destroy Paris in 885 AD had, within 30 years, settled in Normandy and become the Normans. The grandsons of the men who besieged Paris would themselves become French nobles and eventually conquer England. So what does the Paris of 900 AD tell us? It tells us that greatness is rarely built on a foundation of greatness. It is often built on ruins, on the bones of collapsed empires, on the desperate resilience of people who refuse to give up. The 200 defenders of Paris in 885 AD didn't know they were defending the future capital of France. They were just trying to survive another day, to protect their families, to keep the lights on in the darkness. The monks who copied manuscripts by candlelight didn't know they were preserving the seeds of the Renaissance. They were just doing their duty in a world that had largely forgotten why duty mattered. Today, 12 million people call Paris home. 50 million tourists visit every year. The Île de la Cité, that tiny island where it all began, still sits at the center of the city. Walk its length today, and you walk the same ground those 5,000 survivors walked in the darkest years of European history. Paris was barely a city in 900 AD, but barely was enough. Barely was enough to survive, to endure, to become something the world had never seen before. That is the story of Paris, and it began in mud, fire, and fear on a tiny island in a cold northern river. If this video brought the ancient world to life for you, subscribe to The Ancient Lens, a new lost city every week.